the obvious question you have to ask yourself is when am I becoming the bottleneck, right? When do I inhibit rather than enhance my own organization?
Welcome to the Leader's Mindset, where I bring you conversations with leaders who are making an impact in business and our communities. Today, I'm here with Luke Mickelson. Luke is the founder of Sleep in Heavenly Peace, the largest bed building charity in the world. What started in his Idaho garage in 2012 has grown to more than 400,000 beds built by volunteers across roughly 400 chapters in 4 countries. Thanks for joining us today, Luke.
Well, thanks for having me, Jason. This is great.
Hey, a quick interruption before we jump into the questions. It's something I want to talk about that I use every single day. You've heard me talk about how noisy the news has gotten. Inform.now is how I fix that for myself. It texts me the day's facts every morning, no bias, no clickbait, no ads. I liked it enough to partner with them. So full transparency, I earned a small referral if you upgrade. But if you want the news without the noise, it's at inform.co/JLD. That's infmd.co/JLD. Okay, back to the interview. Yeah, I'm really excited to share what you're doing with the audience here. Sleep in Heavenly Peace started with a single bunk bed you built in your garage for a family in your own town back in 2012. Okay. So take us back to that first delivery. What did you see that day that you couldn't unsee?
Well, my first delivery was like the tipping point of deciding to move forward with this. And, Jason, I tell people, when most people, including myself, back then in 2012, had no idea that child bedlessness, which, by the way, is not even a real word, is actually a real problem. And when I discovered it, I was a youth group. I had a position in my church called a young men's president, which basically I was kind of like a youth pastor in the South. But although I tell people I'm not a pastor. But I loved working with the kids. I was a coach and did all the activities with the kids. I had kids of my own. And then when I was in this position, about every other week, we'd meet with other auxiliary leaders within the church, and we'd talk about what's going on in the community. We'd talk about what's going on in our congregation, the people we were helping. Well, one of the leaders stood up and she talked about a family that we were helping. And at first, the family the situation kind of caught my ear because this family lived in a little 2-bedroom apartment that I didn't even know existed in my town. And you got to understand, this town's 4,000 people. I mean, I've been riding my scooter, my bicycle around this place since I was 5, so thinking I knew every inch of this town. And so when they said, over here, it caught my ear because I didn't know that even existed over there. And then she started talking about the things that this family needed that they were helping out with. The mom was the local school bus driver. Dad suffered from a little mental health, so he struggled holding down a job. So the church was helping him financially with rent and utilities. They needed rides to school. The kids didn't have any beds, and they needed food and for breakfast, and they needed bicycle. And I said, wait a minute, wait. And I stopped her. And I said, did you just say the kids don't have any beds? And she says, yeah. And I said, well, certainly they've got like mattresses, right? And she says, no, they're just sleeping on the hard floor with a blanket and pillow. And I don't know, that just hit me. It hit me really hard. I thought about my own kids and the, the conditions that would be like for them to sleep on the floor day in and day out. It was rough to think about, and then, like every leader that's over a youth group nowadays, finding an activity that doesn't involve a computer screen or a Xbox or a phone can be very difficult to do. And here I was thinking, here's a great opportunity to get an Xbox controller out of these boys' hands, put a drill in it, and we'll teach them something, right? So I got pretty excited to build this bed with these Boy Scouts. To kind of speed the story up, the boys, when they came over and we built this bed, a lot of people wanted to be a part of this. And so being that was, Christmas time, the first week of December, it's cold out. Idaho is not exactly the warmest place in the world for Christmas time. I let the boys and some other leaders go on this delivery. So I didn't actually get to go on the very first bed that we built delivery. But when I heard about it the next day at church, I was pretty jealous. I mean, don't get me wrong. I was really excited for the boys, for them to have the opportunity to see child bedlessness, see what it's like, see how happy the kids were to receive their first bed, and also to kind of give the boys an appreciation of what they had. So for a youth leader, it was like a win-win, for us. But again, I felt pretty bummed because I didn't. I shouldn't say pretty bummed. I just felt a little jealous that I didn't get to see the delivery for myself. Right. Well, the next week come around, and like much like life does, it just kind of creeps itself back in, and you go back into the same routine. But I had obviously never forgot about this experience and how it kind of lit a fire in me. And what most people don't know, during this period of time of my life, I was struggling quite a bit, like really struggling both with faith, who I was, what's most important to me in life, and when you get these, I don't know, people call them midlife crisis, if that's what it is, sure, but you get in these ruts of what is important to me. And I was right in the middle of that when I found this and discovered this problem. So being at the first part of Christmas and my kids, wanting all sorts of Christmas presents, it just kind of hit me that I needed to teach these kids the value, just like the Boy Scouts, the value of giving back, the joys that come from service. So we built another bed, and I found my very first delivery. So my first delivery was really unique because when we built that second bed with my kids, Jason, I didn't know what to do with it. Like child bedlessness was solved, right? I didn't know that there was other kids out there that didn't have beds, and so
yeah, I want to jump in for a second before we move on, because I do want to point out the scope of the problem here, because I had no idea until you and I talked the first time.
Yeah.
Child bedlessness in some communities is more than 3%. Now, I know people are 3% is like margin of error on stuff. That's not a lot of stuff. That means for every 100 kids, 3 of them are sleeping on the floor with a blanket and pillow or worse, right?
Correct. Yep, that's right. And and don't a lot of people mistake that that's 3% of the population of children. No, it's 3% of the total population. So your math is correct. If you got 100 or 1,000 kids, there's 3 or 300 kids sleeping on the floor. And so, or 30 kids sleeping on the floor. So, the percentages, yeah, they seem low, but when you consider these are children that we're talking about, and children without beds, number one, and number two, what I found, Jason, is look, we could do something about this. We can. I mean, me and my kids went out in the garage. We had a little extra wood left over from the Boy Scout build. To build another bed, although I've never built furniture before in my life, it was easy. It took a little time, obviously. But I remember when I went on my first delivery, this was a little girl. Her name was Haley, 6 years old, and she had never slept in a bed before, ever. She slept in the backseat of her mom's car. They were homeless. And my friend of mine that told me about this child, worked in the social services somehow, and she helped them get a new house. New to them, right? So I was pretty excited to deliver this bed to her. And so we loaded up the bed and went out to Haley's house. Now, I'd worked with, poverty before. I'd worked with foster care and transitioning homelessness, things of that nature. But I'd never walked into a situation like this, looking at it through the eyes of a 6-year-old. And what would that be like? When you walk in and when there's nothing in the house. There was a can of soup that was sitting on a hot plate. That was it. So there's no couch or TV to watch cartoons in the morning, right? There's no kitchen table and chair to eat your cereal at before school in the morning. And this little girl didn't have anything. But she was so excited because she had a house, and to see that, considering the environment that she lived in, was just a real inspiration to me. Now, she didn't know why we were there, but she was excited to show us her bedroom. And she's, okay, can I show you my bedroom? Right? And I was like, sure, take us back. And when we went back there, you can imagine what this looked like, right? There was holes in the carpet and tears in the wallpaper, and the closet doors missing. There's used toys everywhere. But the most shocking thing of this room wasn't any of that. It was what was in the corner of the room, and it was a pile of clothes. and that's where Haley slept. It was her school clothes. So she would come home from school, she'd put her PJs on, sleep on her school clothes, shirt for pillow and pants for a blanket. And then she put those same shirt and pants on in the morning and go to school. And that I was not prepared for that. I didn't know what I was prepared for, but I wasn't ready to see that, And so, when you go on deliveries for these kids, I could show you videos, I can talk about it, I can testify about it, but there's something about just being in the room, right? There's an emotion and a weight that's in the room, and I felt it very strongly. And, I got pretty excited because we had brought her a bed that she didn't know. And so we started bringing in the pieces and putting it together. And I kind of watched her. I wanted to see what her reaction was. And she didn't disappoint. I mean, she just erupted when she realized it was a bed. She came over and hugged me and my buddy, these two, strange dudes in her room making all sorts of racket. And then she did something I'd never seen before. She went over to the bed, wrapped her arms around it, and kissed it. I mean, like it was her mom. I mean, it was just, I didn't realize that a bed that you and I take for granted is such a luxury to these families and these kids, and it's sad that it should be that, or it's sad it's that way. And so here I am, the tough farm kid, trying to keep it together. And if that wasn't enough just to melt your heart, Jason, I look up and here's mom, a single mom. And I was raised by a single mom, 5 kids. And to watch her cry, 6 years of tears pouring down this poor lady's face. And I knew what each one of those tears meant. I knew the pain and sacrifice and guilt and worry and all of these emotions that she's been experiencing, trying to provide for her daughter, in this case, trying to get a bed for her and just couldn't afford it. Food, clothing, shelter. That was the 3 big ones she had to focus on. Beds, again, unfortunately, were a luxury. And so right then, when I saw that, Jason, I realized very quickly, okay, this is way more than just a bed. This is way more than just a good night's sleep. That was the tipping point. And I tell everybody, listen, again, I'm a farm kid from Idaho. I love hunting. I love fishing. I love outdoors. I love college football on Saturdays, and I loved them for 35 years. But I kid you not, in a snap of a finger, when I saw that, none of that mattered to me anymore. It was like me and my kids built a bed. It took us a couple of nights, a couple hours, a couple of nights to finish that bed. But to solve that problem, yeah, that's well worth my time.
Yeah, and you didn't stop there, right? You started making more and more beds, and you built this network of volunteers and chapters around the country. And you made a deliberate choice not to centrally build finished beds and ship them around the country, but to have volunteers build them locally in their communities with raw lumber from your sponsor.
Right.
Why is how the bed gets built just as important as the bed itself?
It's a great question, and all you nonprofits out there that might be listening that's running a nonprofit, listen, this is some gold nuggets right here. Because I learned very quickly, Jason, when we came back from that delivery, we started building more beds. I want to build more beds. And the more we built and the more we shared on Facebook what we were doing, the more kids we found out in the community that didn't have beds. So we built more. And the more we built, a weird thing happened. The more people that saw this wanted to help. And I quickly realized that, oh my gosh, there are people all over the place that want to give back. They want to help. They want to contribute. They just don't know how. And they haven't found a meaningful, fulfilling service to them that would scratch that service itch for them. So I quickly learned 2 things. Number 1, child bedlessness is much bigger than I had ever imagined. It is all over the place. So a kid in Idaho, just some dude in Idaho, isn't going to solve this problem nationwide, right? We got to teach the people locally in their own communities, in their own towns, to solve this problem for their kids. And I also realized that there are millions of people that want to help, right? And so you put those 2 things together, it only screams, building a franchise type model, although that's not what we are. But I knew it needed to be happening and built in the local communities. And then what that provided, and to answer your question, the volunteer experience is just as important as the mission and the kids that we serve. Because without volunteers, you can't build any beds or deliver them, right? And I learned this kind of a hard way, because us nonprofit leaders, we get into these situations. We want our volunteers to come back because we recognize that. So we do all the heavy lifting, right? We want to make it easy on our volunteers. Well, if you don't mind, I could share a story. A guy named Hank. It was my very first public build. And this old guy comes walking in. And this guy, I mean, he's ancient. He's like 700 years old, which I was a little worried because, in a build process, they're not exactly easy physically. You're lifting up lumber and moving it around and cutting it and doing all sorts of stuff with it. So when he come up to me and he says, "Hey, Luke, where do you need me?" I really thought, I'm like, where do I put this guy, right? I said, "Well, what did you do for a living?" And he says, "Well, I was a carpenter for 40 years. I said, "Okay. I know exactly where to put this guy. If there's one part of our build process you can't screw up, it's cutting the wood." And so I put him on the saw, and it's the most dangerous part, right? So this guy knew what he was doing. And when you're in a build, right, you're the only guy running around. There's 60, 80 people there. You're teaching everybody how to build these beds and do these stations. Well, anyways, 4 hours go by, and I completely forgot about Hank. And it just dawns on me. I'm like, oh my gosh, I ran back to the cut station and I said, "Hank, how you doing?" And here's this old guy just covered in sawdust, and he stopped cutting. He looked at me and wiped his face off because it was as white as his hair. I mean, it was hilarious. But I felt super bad. And he looks at me and he goes, "Luke, let me tell you something." I said, "Oh crap, here we go. I'm going to be in trouble." He says, "I've volunteered my whole life at different events, different organizations." He says, "But I've never shown up to an event, and in 5 minutes, I was put on an assignment, and it was so critical that I didn't leave. Like people were counting on me. The whole train would stop if I didn't continue to do my job." And I remember thinking, I said, "Hank, I'm sorry. I should have come, because he's like, I couldn't even go to the bathroom." And I said, "Man, I'm so sorry." And it's funny. He held his hand up, to tell me to stop. And he says, No. He says, "Thank you." And it took me back. I was like, "Thank you? What are you talking about?" And it dawns on me, Jason, we spend too much time making these opportunities to volunteer too easy, right? And anybody that wants to volunteer their time, especially if you're going to take your morning, Saturday mornings, right? You're going to come down to some cold warehouse, freeze your butt off, right? You're going to lose your Saturday to volunteer. You want to make sure it's worth it. You want to feel like you actually made a difference. And that's what providing a good quality volunteer experience does for your organization and for the volunteers. And so Sleep in Emily Peace, that we actually don't build any beds. We teach the community how to build the beds. And because of that, because when they show up like Hank and they feel those fulfilling feelings that they've been looking for, that satisfying feeling of, hey, I actually helped, right? It's not just a donation of money. I actually got my hands on every single piece of wood that is now going to, 50 kids, depending on the bill that day. So that volunteer experience, you're right, is far more important than most of us give it value to. That's why now at Sleeping on the Peace, it's one of our four core values is the volunteer experience because it's that important.
Yeah, it sounds like providing meaning to what you're doing, to what these volunteers are doing, is what gets them showing up in the first place, and it keeps them coming back, along with finding a way they fit in where they can maximize their skills. It's great.
Well, and the meaning's easy, right? The meaning for being there is to help kids, to build beds for kids. But what's not often talked about, but a reality, is what the volunteer gets out of it. And if you talk to actually Mike Rowe, Dirty Jobs Mike Rowe, he's the one that brought this up on his podcast when I was talking with him. He says, Luke, you could probably argue that service is a little selfish, right? And he's not wrong. He's not wrong. We all show up because we want to help kids. That's not the point. But you do get something out of it, right? And what you get out of it is the opportunity, number one, to serve someone. And it gives you that fulfilling feeling, right? And I tell people, Listen, if you want true joy in life, right, you just got to stop looking at yourself, looking at your problems, and see how you can help someone else out. And this is what happens. Do your problems go away? Of course not, right? They don't just magically disappear. But when you provide service for others and you stop thinking about yourself, it puts you in this state of mind that you see things in a different perspective, right? How many times you go on service and you come back from serving someone and you're just, the weight is lifted off you. You don't know why. You just feel good about yourself. And the reason why that happens is us humans, I think, have this weird superpower. I hate it. Where when we don't like to face a problem, we throw it in the closet. And what does those problems do when we do that? They just get bigger. They get bigger and hairier and uglier, right? So until we open that closet door and have the courage to face it, it grows. Well, when you do service and you put yourself in a situation where you can now have a different perspective, a much healthier perspective, then when you open that door and look at that problem, it's not near as heavy as it used to be. It's not near as heavy or near as big of a problem as you remember. That's what service provides us volunteers, is that ability and gift of perspective, of seeing things in a lighter weight.
I'm glad you brought up Mike Rowe, because attention from Mike Rowe helped you scale from single-digit chapters to over 125 in a single year. Now, that kind of scale on a nonprofit volunteer organization can sometimes cause it to implode.
Yeah. How
did you navigate that successfully?
Oh, man, that's a great question. My first answer back in the day when I was like, I have no idea how that happened. But when you look back and you can realize, okay, we recognize that when this episode of Returning the Favor on Facebook Watch was going to air, we knew we were going to get some people that wanted to do what we do in their own hometown. I actually figured we get about 20 in a year. Well, we actually got about 2,000 applications that first year. Now, only 125, I quote, only, actually started chapters. But you're right, that influx, that scalability was so fast that there was a lot of problems at first. Without going in too much of the weeds, we set this nonprofit up to make sure that when you donate your money, 90% of your dollar stays in the chapter, in that community of where you donate, right? So if you're in Miami and you want to donate to the Twin Falls, Idaho chapter, you can, and 90+% of your dollar stays there. Well, that requires each one of these chapters to have their own bank account. Well, when you set up 125 bank accounts in QuickBooks, it doesn't really work very well, and you don't know that until you try it. There was a period of time, I kid you not, Jason, we had $250,000, which for us, our budget before all this happened was like $50,000 a year. And within 3 months, we had $250,000 sitting in the bank account. And because of so many bank accounts that we have, we were tripping out your ability to go online and look at the account. No one could see their account. I mean, talk about some sleepless, stressful nights when you got $250,000 from these 100 people across the country and no one can get to the money. I mean, it was really difficult. So to answer your question is, yeah, we learned a lot along the way, but we were very blessed with people that were very patient with us, right? To allow us and help us to work through some of these challenges. And I think the key behind that, and I don't know if this is good business strategy or not, it just worked for us, was we were completely honest and transparent with people right from the beginning. It was like, Jason, you're a chapter president. I'm going to tell you right now, we're building this plane as we're flying it. Just please be patient with us, right? And we walked these questions that everybody had, walked with the chapter presidents through them all, right? And so I guess my advice to those that are scaling quickly, you just have to be transparent, and realize and recognize that, hey, you're human too. And that's okay to show that kind of weakness because you don't know, and you're experiencing problems that no one would have ever anticipated that come across. And when you're transparent about that, and when you're open about that, I think most people on the planet are pretty understanding when they feel like they're not being lied to or tricked, or whatnot. So I learned that it's very important to keep that transparency open and honest. And we continue through. Obviously, as a nonprofit, you kind of have to really enforce that, and we do. We have the highest star rating on GuideStar and Navigator, Charity Navigator, because we want to make sure. And I knew when I started this nonprofit, because this was never going to be a nonprofit, it was just going to be a family Christmas project until we found out how bad it was. I said, okay, if we're going to be a nonprofit, then we're going to run it the way I think a nonprofit should be run, as transparent and open and as lean as we possibly can. For example, when you donate $100 to any chapter, just $100 to Sleep in Heavenly Peace, we only take 10% to do the administration side. I mean, I still got to turn the lights on and pay for insurance and stuff like that, but only 10%. And that's extremely hard to find in nonprofits nowadays.
Yeah, I think that the idea of transparency in everything is great advice. In the Air Force, we used to say bad news doesn't get better with age.
It's true. It's true.
Now, I want to give the audience an accurate picture of how the organization works, because it's not just you and a bunch of chapters and a big free-for-all on how everyone's doing something. You have regional support leads who are a key part of this. So I want to understand more about their role. And I really want to talk about when you've got so many different chapters doing things the way that works for their local communities, how do you maintain accountability and how do you maintain the brand while still giving them the flexibility they need?
Yeah, great question. And it honestly is probably one of the hardest things to do. That the two hardest things about scaling that fast and that large is exactly that: maintaining consistency with brand, with process, with product. Right? Those are really hard to do. And why? It's because when you, especially in the nonprofit world, when volunteers come on, you teach them a very, let's just say, very open process of how to build a bed. I mean, there's 6 ways to Sunday to build these beds, right? But there are important parts and processes of making this bed that even we don't have control over. The insurance regulates, or the IRS regulates, right? So there are some things that we have to stay within the lines, whether we want to or not. And to disseminate that to a chapter president that lives 5 states over and is all isolated, and really wants to do it this way or provide this instead of this, to really teach them that you can't do that. Again, it requires a lot of patience on their end, and the second hardest thing is to disseminate. I hate to use the word down. I'll just say out, right? Disseminate out to chapters. What are the new, basically training, right? Teaching them, coaching them on the things that need to be coached on, the changes that happened, right? That's why we knew when we started rapidly putting on all these chapters, one guy or 2 or even 3 guys sitting at the quote corporate office isn't going to effectively answer or support all these questions from these 100+ chapter presidents. So that's when we realized, like any business, we need some management there. We need, kind of like a district manager option. So instead of us taking 100 on, let's have, 3 or 4 people take 20 on, and so we created what we call the chapter support lead, the CSL lead. And we also divided the whole country into 9 regions, right? So for a lot of reasons, now we can, isolate certain chapters in certain areas, which was ingenious, for us down the road to realize, because now at the size we are, we can talk about and deal with regional problems at a regional level rather than trying to deal with, the whole country at once. And so that form of structure, when we put this together, and we put, I mean, there's a number of minds that got together and realized scalability is something that it just doesn't happen. Scalability starts with putting together a structure that is scalable, right? I used to tell my team, listen, we're on a highway and we're going 80 miles an hour. What you need, if you think that you're going to fill in a pothole When it's right in front of your car, you're going to hit it, and it's going to cause some damage. So we need to look way, way miles down the road so we have time to fill in these holes. And, when you start out, you're just going to hit potholes. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. But when you can get to the point where you can now be proactive with solutions and proactive with processes that are going to be needed, especially when you scale, that's when you're on the right path. And that took a little while for us to get there. Even nowadays, I'm not even the executive director anymore. I don't even do much with the day to day, right? I'm the founder. I do a lot of public speaking and whatnot because of the growth that we've had and the necessity of divvying out these hats that everybody used to wear to other areas that can now focus a little more, solve and fill potholes a little quicker down the road. So.
Well, it sounds like you've really set yourself up for success by distributing out the communication and the patience functions so that they don't all fall on you and your team at headquarters. Yeah. But I want to take a break from these questions. I want to play a game. Are you up for a game?
Let's do it.
All right. The name of this game is Rapid Response. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. I want you to respond with the first thing that comes to mind. Okay. Don't be fooled by the word rapid. You don't need to give one-word answers. Elaborate as much or as little as you'd like. Sure. We just want to get to know you a little better, okay?
Sure. Let's do it.
All right. Luke Mickelson, rapid response round. Your time begins now. A podcast recommendation.
Mike Rowe's.
That's a good one. That's a good one. I hear. I have not started listening to it yet, and I need to get it onto my list because I am I think Mike Rowe, I just saw him on a talk show the other night, and he's doing really great work trying to help young men, get to do the things that you and I had growing up and those kinds of mentors and those kinds of opportunities that we had when we were growing up that I don't think really exist for young men anymore. So big fan of Mike Rowe. We have a couple of guests coming on the show to talk about that exact problem over the next few weeks.
Well, and the beauty thing about Mike Rowe, I mean, you can listen to him all day. He's got that voice that's soothing and unlike a lot of podcasts that I've been on, he does his homework. So he researches his people. And when you listen to these, and there's other great people like Joe Rogan and some of these big ones, they're big because they have a great ability of communication, but more importantly, they have a great ability of listening, right? And they can listen to the guests and be able to respond and bring out stories and bring out the points that the guest wants to get. That's when a podcast has gone well, is when the guest feels like he or she got out the points that they want to, and the host was able to pull that out and at least provide a platform for them to feel comfortable and easy to be able to release that. Mike Rowe does that very well, and he's just a personal guy.
Communication and patience. I'm sensing a theme today.
Yeah. We all need to work on it.
Besides communication and patience, what's a practice you'd like to see more people embrace?
Ooh, being honest with themselves. Which I think if you crack it down to one thing, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to make mistakes and even admit those mistakes. That was a hard lesson and continued lesson that I'm trying to teach myself is, and us leaders too. When you're a leader or a CEO or a founder, a person in authority or elevated position, let's call it, there's this predisposition that you feel like we can't make a mistake. We have to have all the answers. And I think on my podcast, I have a podcast called the Leadership Evolution Podcast, where that's just a leadership technique, I think, that's evolving through time. It's not as important or demanding as where we had business out there and you could not make a mistake. You could not, this or that wrong because it was super important that you showed or displayed some sort of, perfectness, some sort of not making mistakes. Well, the fact of the matter is we're all human, and there's nothing wrong with making a mistake, and there's nothing wrong with admitting that. If we did that, I think there'd be far more people willing to help and step up and be a part of the solution rather than just be told what to do.
Who is someone we should all be paying attention to?
Oh, wow. Honestly, probably yourself. And I don't mean that in a selfish way. Again, and I would throw your spouse in there too, or your significant other, people that love you. Because listen, if we can learn to be honest with ourselves, and realize that, and that's a hard thing to do. When you're honest with yourself, no one can hurt you. You can't be hurt because, if someone brings something up that you do bad or have a hard time with or a weakness, guess what? You already know it. You've already faced that. You're already dealing with that. And when you do that, that gives you the ability to be much happier, to be more involved, be more helpful to other people, right? I mean, if you think about it, you can never be hurt. You can never be, what's the word? I don't know, criticized or taken off guard or something like that, because you already know it, right? And what a wonderful state of mind to be in when you can admit to yourself your flaws, admit to yourself your strengths, and then focus in on those and be more successful in life. So I think, again, without being selfish, if you would just listen to your inner voice, the one that's actually trying to get through to tell you to be more honest with yourself, I think you'll be further ahead, more happy too.
What is either your get pumped up song or your walk on music?
That would probably depend on which sport I was playing. To be honest with you, I mean, back in the day, it was Back in Black. That gets you fired up, right? But I've had different theme songs, I think, through the years. Boy, I don't know. That's a good one. I actually, because I'm older, I've had a heart attack, surprisingly enough, being so young. I really try to listen to calming music, right, and more meditation music, and that's one thing I've learned, by the way, Jason. All these business professionals and coaches that I've interviewed, successful people that have built $100 million organizations. There is one thing that's pretty common in all of those. They all take time for themselves. They all take time to meditate. They all take time to get themselves, emotionally and mentally ready to take on the day. And I do that. I do a lot of that through music.
We talk about that a lot on the educational episodes from this podcast, the short ones, where and it seems to be a theme that comes up with every leadership challenge every week of take time for that self, that morning routine, that evening routine, block that time so you can get yourself set up for success for the day and block out time to think strategically as a leader and protect those at all costs, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's funny, and not to switch it back because I think we're still playing the game, but when you think about the preparation you have during the day, or at least before the day starts, right? That's so critical, trying to get your mindset and ready to go. Now think about a child who's never had a bed, that never slept in the bed. Yeah, there's no real good preparation in the morning. And these kids, in the most vulnerable and growth period time of their life, their adolescent years, they got to go to school and learn after a horrible night's sleep or real uncomfortable. These are the challenges that child bedlessness presents to these kids.
Yeah, I love that we worked that into the game part of this, because this is the part of the podcast everyone loves the most, the guests, the audience, everyone, and we slipped something in on you folks, so I hope you're still paying attention. We're going to get back to the child bedlessness stuff. Biggest influence in your life?
Well, I've had a number of them. I grew up without a dad. My mom was a single mom, but I was the athlete of a very small school. So, the big fish in the small pond type theme. And I love that, if anything, for the fact that I had a lot of dads, and they were all coaches and they were all mentors, dads, mission presidents, leaders, bosses. I was able to pull good things and bad things out of that. But I think if I looked at all of them, the most inspirational and most influential on my life's probably been my mom. To see a single mom with 5 kids, 3 jobs, working as hard as she can to provide, those single moms. And we see them in Sleeping Only Peace all the time. A good portion of our beds go to single parent homes, which is typically mothers. And these strong women that are fighting the fight, not only on the child rearing side, but she's fighting on the provide economic side too. And those are 2 very difficult battles by themselves. and then to see my own mom go through that successfully and raise some pretty good kids in very small means. How can I not make that a hero?
A book everyone should read.
Ooh. I'm just starting in the middle of it. Although I've read a lot of short stories, I'm in the middle of Jordan Peterson's book. The 12 Rules. I don't even remember the title of it, but amazing. I think nowadays common sense is in short supply sometimes. And and he's one of a few that are actually tackling some of these challenges in our political, culturally landscape that are just common sense things, and gives people the space to actually think for themselves, and realize that common sense is still alive, or it can be still alive without being criticized for it. So that right now is a book that I'm really excited to be in the middle of. In fact, I think I have it up here somewhere, but it's just 12 rules of human engagement or something like that. I can't remember, but check him out, Jordan Peterson.
All right. Your favorite recreational activity?
Probably fishing. I was a big sturgeon fisherman. We'd catch 8-foot sturgeon out here in Idaho, and it's super fun. I love taking people out and teaching them how to catch that. No one really has ever caught an 8-foot sturgeon before, 8-foot fish, period. Not very many people. So it's fun to see that. I don't get to do it near as much as I used to, because sleeping on the piece takes up a lot of time. But that's okay. That's okay.
Your dream vacation spot?
Oh, man. Me and my wife talk about this all the time. She's a beach gal. And I want to say I'm a mountain guy, but man, I don't mind a beach either. That makes sense. I think, honestly, if you were to incorporate everything I want in a vacation, I want someplace that I can be peace and quiet, someplace I can, enjoy a great view, a great weather, and include an activity. This is going to sound weird, but an activity where I'm involved helping someone, like I'm accomplishing something. I've learned that about myself. I can go on vacation and just be restless the whole time. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs might be this way, because your identity is so tied into your business, the business aspect of your life, especially us men, or not just men, the breadwinner of the family. You're so tied into your work that when you're not working, sometimes that can bring some anxiety that you're not used to. And I'm learning that anxiety for me is, if I don't feel like I'm actually building something or improving something, it's hard for me to sit still. So.
A trend you're excited about?
Ooh. AI. Pretty excited about AI, as I've learned more and more how to use it, which I know some people are probably hating me right now for that. But it is coming, and so I'm trying to do my best to embrace it. And I'll tell you this, so far I've found almost the only limitation on AI is us not realizing and asking the questions that are available to ask. I mean, it is a very scary tool for a lot of reasons, but it's also an amazing tool, and I'm excited to see where it can go.
Yeah, I do want to dig into how you're using AI and other kinds of tech in Sleep in Heavenly Peace to advance the goals. But just for right now, I'll echo that sentiment. Is in my use of AI, which I've been using like ChatGPT for a couple of years, but really started leaning into AI agents about 6 months ago. Mm-hmm. And what I have found as an entrepreneur is, because AI is doing that work now, it has freed my mind up to ask those new questions. Yeah. And I can loop that right back into what AI is doing.
Isn't that crazy? It's like, you're right. You kind of free up your mind. I know this sounds weird, but you do. You free up your mind to think, well, what if, can AI do this? Well, ask it. And when you ask it, I'll give you a great example. I'm trying to reach all sorts of people, especially large companies that have corporate social responsibilities that are in line with our mission. Well, how can I reach that many people? Number one, find them. Then how can I reach and target them and connect with them? Well, guess what? AI knows where all of them are at. AI knows how to contact them, or at least the process and way to contact them. Just ask where they're at. And boom, there's a list for you. That would have otherwise taken me months and months to find and gather. I got in 10 minutes.
That's the kind of work I have AI doing is go, I have a question, go find me, in this case, the people I want to connect with on this. Yeah. And every week, look for more people to add to this list.
Oh, yeah. Lead generation's amazing.
Let's build another task that automates the process of reaching out to them, finding their contact information, et cetera, et cetera. So I get down to just, having the conversation with the person.
Well, you end up, and sorry, we'll probably be late in this point, but, AI, I have sequences and drip email campaigns going on while I'm sleeping at night. I mean, for crying out loud, which now gives me the ability to, contact and reach way more people in a much smaller period of time, and the right people, mind you. And that, that's some of the hard things. I was in sales for 20 years, right? Some of the hard things is you waste a lot of time just trying to find the right contact. Well, if you use AI, if only to find the right contact, think about how much time that would save you in your days, weeks, and months, especially in a sales position, when you can find 100 contacts in one city that would otherwise take you maybe a year to find, cold calling or searching online by yourselves.
All right, last one. Favorite sports team or player?
Ooh. Well, I'm a Boise State fan. That's a sports team, not a professional one. Us in Idaho, we don't have that. It's funny, in Idaho, when you think about professionalism or professional sports, we get to pick whoever we want. So Idaho is a hodgepodge of I'm a 49er fan, only because 49ers, when I grew up, you had Steve Young, you had Joe Montana. They were the hit, they were the star back then when I was growing up. So I've always been a 49er fan, right? Why? Well, that's why. I couldn't tell you what's going on right now. But yeah, I like college football and I like to support Boise State. So that's probably my favorite. That's my favorite sports team. As far as my favorite individual athlete is what you asked.
If you've got a favorite player, I asked the question because some folks aren't team sports folks. They're like golf or tennis or individual sports folks. So they don't have a team, but they have a favorite player sometimes.
Yeah. I don't really have a favorite player. I mean, I used to be huge into sports. I loved watching, like I said, Joe Montana, Steve Young, those types. I tell you what I enjoy. I enjoy seeing success. I enjoy seeing the skills of athletes nowadays. They're just amazing, right? I don't really like or hate anybody that's at that level unless they're, they have some social issue. But they're all amazing athletes, and it can be very impressed by that, and I am. So.
All right. Well, thanks for playing our game. It's nice to get to know you a little bit. Sure. You talked a little earlier about you stepped back from being the executive director of the organization, and now you're in more of an ambassador role. A lot of founders, especially in tech, have a really hard time with this. You've called it founder syndrome. I think other people have called it founder syndrome. What is the first time as a founder or a creator, someone who started the organization, what's the first sign it's time to step back and let others take the wheel?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there's not a specific time I've found. If I've talked to these other nonprofit founders or even for-profit CEOs, it's different. It's different because the obvious question you have to ask yourself is when am I becoming the bottleneck, right? When do I inhibit rather than enhance my own organization? The reason why that's really hard, and the reason why I think it's so important, listen, everybody out there, you founders and CEOs, it's so important that you understand founder syndrome, because when it may eventually be too late for you to realize you're going through it or you're experiencing it, and you've already caused damage to not just your organization, but your position and your legacy. I've seen it time and time again where they just stay in it as long as they can. And I get it. Trust me, I get it. No one wants to leave their organization. right? But when other people are starting to make that decision for you because it's happening, because you are the bottleneck, you are the inhibitor, how is that going to make you feel? How does that make you feel when someone else is telling you, hey, Luke, yeah, you need to move on because this is causing a problem, right? You don't handle that well. I promise you, you're not going to handle that well. This is founder syndrome. And so, again, it kind of goes back to learn to be honest with yourself. Learn to, and trust people around you, right? I think, again, far too often, we aren't vulnerable in a positive way. We don't have the people that we open to and talk to and have an honest conversation. Say, hey, Jason, you're my right hand man. What? How am I? Am I causing a problem here? Right? Am I the issue here? Coaching is a good way to help with that, and really just being honest with yourself and realizing, okay, yeah, I am in a lot of ways inhibiting rather than enhancing my organization. I need to maybe some reevaluate here. And there's different stages you can go through that. But the best thing you can do is, even if you don't think you're going through it right now, don't think you need to make that decision. That's fine. But have a plan to deal with that decision. If you don't, and you're talking to someone, and there's very, 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 very few founders that are doing what I'm doing, which is recognizing I went through it, recognizing that there's not a lot of people and coaching opportunities and help for people that are going through it, that have been through it. Well, you're talking to one. I've been through it. It's been ugly. It's been hard. It has cost me, or could have cost me a lot. And now that I've understood what it is and gone through it, and you'll always go through it. You don't leave founder syndrome. It's always there, because you always have relevance wounds. You always have, things that come up that make you feel like a little bit like your identity is lost or be taken away from you. How you deal with that is what you need to work on. And what shameless plug, what my founder syndrome survival course really is all about, is to help founders deal with those relevance wounds when they happen, and how to deal with them and how to move forward. So.
What was something you personally had to let go when you took that step back, and what did you get out of it? What did you gain from it?
Oh, great question. You personally have to let go management, obviously, which sounds awesome in a lot of ways. You don't have to make near as many decisions. You're not involved with near as many meetings. But when you tie your identity to that, which you do, which you will, which you have, that's hard to let go. That's hard to feel like someone else can run the ship. They may run it better or worse, but someone else can run the ship. So giving up that responsibility, that quote control, is difficult. But what it does bring to the table, number one, is you do have more of an ability, which I think is very critical, especially when you take something away from a founder, like especially part of his decision process that he's been doing for years and years and years. You take that away from him. That's where hurt comes in. But what you realize afterwards is now you're free and open to think of other things, to think of a different way to help your organization. You don't have to make the day-to-day calls anymore, which I get can be difficult at first, but open and expand your mind to, well, now what can I do? Now what avenues can I pursue? Now what ways can I enhance and further my organization? And that requires another step in the founder syndrome survival course, which is called name your role. And I have 5. There's they're all called different things, but I consider myself the ambassador now. So now when you look at what does an ambassador do? He doesn't make day-to-day calls. He doesn't hire and fire. He doesn't review budgets per se for annual operating plans and things of that nature. No. He's there to be the ambassador, the mouthpiece, the growth for the mission, for the people, for the volunteers, or your employees, your company name, whatever it is. That's a role that I've taken. I've let people know that that's my new role, which is another part of understanding and moving forward through founder syndrome. I think it's really, really important you do that.
We talked a little bit about the AI piece earlier. How else are you applying new tech in the mission of what you're trying to do with Sleep in Heavenly Peace across all of your regions and chapters?
Yeah. Probably the biggest area that we deal with is in marketing. I think that's probably the number one go-to when you're wanting to try and should really be implementing AI. We have drip campaigns and email campaigns and all sorts of stuff that are going on automatically while we sleep. AI is doing that for us. I'll give you a great example too, is when you go to our website, shpbeds.org, right? Back in the day, it would just bring up one website, like one main page, like most people, right? Now, and that served kind of a purpose. Well, it served a purpose, obviously, back in the day. But really what we want to do is have people know what's going on in their town. Jason, I don't know where you're from. Let's say you're from Chicago. I want to know when you bring up shpbeds.org because you want to learn about child bedlessness, you want to learn it about in your own town. Well, AI has now given us the ability to go, boom, you're going to bring up shpbeds.org. It's going to bring up the closest chapter to you because we want you to see how many kids are waiting for beds, how many beds have been served, what is the activities that are going on locally, all that kind of stuff. So AI has been able to give us that ability. We use AI for obviously lead generation, both in grants. My role is partnerships. Find those corporate social responsibility managers that have the same initiatives and that line up with ours. We use AI for that. Just proposal creation, verbiage, email writing. There's all sorts of things. Again, the limitation is just what we ask it, what we think to ask it, I should say.
I love it. And something else I really love is that you have Bunks Across America coming up September 12th through 19th. Tell us what that is, and then tell us what else you guys have coming up as well.
Back in the day, I had a 12-year-old kid come up to me, and he had a great idea. He says, Luke, why don't we have all our chapters build at the same time? And this is back when we only had about 90 chapters. What if we all built on the same day? And I'm like, that's a great idea. He says, well, let's do it. It was almost like a challenge, a 12-year-old kid, for crying out loud. And so that's what we ended up doing. We wanted to have a day where we build beds all at the same time. And here's the thing. It's not about the number of beds we build. And we build 10,000 that day, nationwide. It's not about that. It's about two things: raising awareness about child bedlessness, because you can't solve a problem if you don't know about it. And for an example, Jason, you and I talk right now. As we sit and talk right now, of all of our chapters combined, there's on average, and this number really just fluctuates up and down about 10,000, there's 150,000 kids on our waiting list all the time, right? Like I said, it just fluctuates up and down as we deliver and get more applications all the time. And we only cover 30% of the United States, right? So we have a long way to go to cover all of the United States. And so, yeah, that's just a critical part of what we're trying to do, and how we feel like if we can reach more people and share our mission and broadcast that more, then we help more kids.
All right. As we wrap it up, if someone's watching, if they're listening to this and they decide they don't want any kids in their town sleeping on the floor anymore, what's the very first move they should make?
Go to shpbeds.org. We actually there's a bunch of ways that you can participate, right? Like I mentioned before, you're going to see what's going on in that chapter, which means you can volunteer for one of the events, whether it's building the beds, and no experience is required. If you've never touched a drill in your life, that's okay. We teach you how to do it. Or you can deliver a bed, which is the coolest thing on the planet, to be able to show up to a child that has maybe, quite possibly, never had a bed to sleep in, and you bring a bed to that child, and you get to see their reaction. You get to see and feel, more importantly, what's going on. That's awesome. So you can volunteer. You can donate, whether it's, I want to donate, they're all twin-size beds, and we only take brand new stuff. You can donate twin sheets and pillows and mattresses because we provide the whole 9 yards, right? Donations. 90+% of your donation stays in that chapter. So you can donate. We're a nonprofit. We need that, right? Raise awareness. Help us reach other people. Help us, you never know. You talk to someone in the grocery store about this podcast you heard about some dude talking about child bedlessness, and there's a solution for it. Man, the person right behind you might be a single mom that doesn't have beds for their kids that's looking for it. So just open your mouth. And if you want to be a part of something and there's not a chapter close by, and this is really something that you want to be a part of, you can start a chapter. We put on 50, 60 chapters a year. We train them. We fly them out to Utah. We teach them for a weekend. In fact, just this last weekend, we just trained 24 new chapters, right? And last of all, if you know a child, whether it's your own child, next door neighbors, or 5 states over, you know someone that has a child sleeping on the floor, you can apply for that child. Just go to our website, shpbeds.org. Click apply for apply for a bed, and fill out the application for that child based on the zip code. If we have a chapter president, granted we only cover 30% right now, but if we have a chapter president that has accepted that zip code as a deliverable area, then they will get that application and be able to serve that child.
Well, this has been terrific. I want to thank you for joining us today, Luke. Besides the website, is there anywhere else people watching or listening can reach you so they can thank you for joining us today?
Absolutely. Send me an email, luke@lukemickelson.com or luke.mickelson@shpbeds.org. Those are 2 different ways. You can go to my Facebook or my socials. It's just type in Luke Mickelson, SHP Luke, or Sleep on the P. You'll find me. I'm all over the place. I'm on LinkedIn. I would love to hear from you. Share a story. I've had a couple of podcasters actually now are looking to maybe even start a chapter in their own area. I mean, how cool is that, right? And I get a lot of cool comments from people that said, "Hey, I heard you on the podcast. Tell me a little bit more. How can I help?" Man, I love those emails. So really the biggest thing is just open your mouth. Help us carry this message of child bedlessness is a real problem to the world.
Well, and we will put all of those links into the episode description so you folks don't have to go find them, so you can use them, so you can share them. Again, Luke, thank you for joining us today. This has been a pleasure. I want to thank all of you for watching and listening. If you found this conversation valuable, go ahead and share it with someone who can use it. Leave us a comment. Don't forget to subscribe. And since I'm asking everybody for favors, go ahead and give us a 5-star review on your podcast listener or viewer. It really helps us expand the audience and get these great conversations like the one we had with Luke out to more people. And we do have a lot more amazing leaders coming your way. So go out there, do great things today. Onward and upward. One last thing before you go, like I mentioned at the top, Inform.now is the news by text I use every single day. The link's in the description if you want it. We'll see you next time. Onward and upward.